Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Speaking on Anime. So tonight, I apologize for the confusion this week on what we were going to be talking about. We are going to be talking about Goblin Slayer, obviously, which you can see from the bottom and from the announcement. I got confused last week and couldn't remember which exact anime we were supposed to be talking about this week, and so yeah, I apologize and had to make an announcement midweek to let everybody know about the change. So this is an anime that I am relatively new to. Just wanted to say welcome to everybody in the chat so far. We've got Jester of Sin, welcome, Spartan072, and Adega Outlaw so far that are talking in the chat. So welcome, everyone. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. This is, as I said, this is kind of a relatively new anime for me. This is, it's not easy to find. I searched around through all the different streaming services that I have to look to find this, and I finally ended up finding it on HBO Max. So if you're looking to watch this, this is one of the only places you can find it, at least in English. I think you can find it in subtitles in other places. But if you're looking for it in English, that's one of the only places I found it. Now, I will tell you right off the bat, this anime is dark. It deals with some very dark, kind of adult topics. This is not an anime for kids. I would say nobody under 16 should watch this, and maybe not even that young, because of some of the material that's in it. But it's a really interesting story. It's very well told. The characters are engaging. It surprised me. This was one that was suggested to me by actually Spartan072. And he suggested I go watch this one. So I put it on my list and finally got to it. And yeah, I really liked it. Like I said, the first episode will make you very uncomfortable. I will tell you that much. If you're at all squeamish, you're gonna feel a little like, oh my, and stuff. But it's mainly because it's just right there in your face. Like, it doesn't sugarcoat anything. So I am going to talk some spoilers. So like for Jester of Sin, actually, he said, he hasn't actually seen this one. Even with the spoilers, trust me, it's something you'll be able to go watch and you'll enjoy it. Seeing it, even though I might tell you some things that are going to happen in it, because it's like most animes, you can talk about it all day long, but until you actually see it and go through that experience, it's not the same thing. So if you're worried about me ruining it for you, Jester of Sin, just I'm sorry. I'll try not to give too much away. But you gotta really kind of go into the storyline if you're gonna get to understand why this is a good anime. Now, this is also, as I was looking today, this anime is controversial. I think mainly because it is quite in your face about some subjects. I mean, it's okay. So yeah, it is on some other sites, but you will not be able to find it in English. Like I said, Hulu or HBO Max has it in English. So yeah, the first episode, if you can get through the first episode, you're going to be like, okay, because that's probably, as far as like graphic content, the first one is where you're going to see probably some of the worst. But it covers some topics that that people don't talk about very much, and that shouldn't be hidden in the back room and pretended like it doesn't happen or it's not a real thing. Although we don't need to just like have it slapped in our face all the time. Oh, good. Okay, so yeah. Like I said, I can tell you about it all day, but till you actually see it, you won't completely understand. But yeah, so it's so the first episode, we meet a priestess. Now I was going through and I was sitting there thinking as I was looking for the character names today, because I am terrible with remembering character names, especially where I've only gone through this anime twice. There's only 12 episodes, and then there is a movie. I have not seen the movie yet. I'm going to watch that today, hopefully, if I get a chance. But the character names, they're very generic, and yet within the show, like the characters themselves actually like give each other nicknames. So we've got Goblin Slayer. That's what he's referred to. Now he has a name, but nobody ever really calls him that. Everybody calls him Goblin Slayer. That's what he calls himself. We have the priestess. We have the high elf archer. We have cowgirl, guild girl, dwarf shaman, lizard priest, witch, and spearman. Those are the main characters. And I was looking around. I'm like, those aren't the names of the you know. So like I said, the dwarf. I mean, basically, he gets called the dwarf most of the time. Like nobody ever refers to him by his name. They also have some odd names for Goblin Slayer. They call the dwarf calls him Beard Cutter, and the high elf calls him Orkbolg, which is just basically different terms for Goblin Slayer. But when we get into this first episode, we meet the priestess first, and she is just out of like priest school, just out of temple, I guess is what they call it. And she is going to a guild to become an adventurer. Being an adventurer is a big deal in this kingdom. They have the army, they have different like stuff, but then there's just these groups of like adventurers. You could actually basically break them down into they're bounty hunters, for lack of a better term. They go and kill magical beasts and help enforce that kind of stuff throughout the kingdom, and they get paid to do it. And so they spend a lot of time at this guild hall, and they all go there to find jobs and to look into various different things for work. And you have a lot of different characters that you're going to meet in the guild. They don't really talk a lot. You don't see a lot about the other characters. They kind of come in and out of the show. And you don't, like I said, those main characters that I just told you about, those are the ones that you're going to be following most of the time. But the high priestess comes in. She comes into this guild hall, and they have different levels of adventurers. The initial level is the porcelain level, and then it goes all the way up to I believe platinum is the top, and then it's like gold, and then like and then silver, and then like a whole bunch of other levels down through there. They don't really go through all of them. They just kind of tell you what the bottom ones are and the top ones, and it's just like, and then the rest are just wherever. So it's not really important, but the silver ones are considered most of the high-ranking adventurers are what they call silvers. It's pretty rare that you'll find a gold or a platinum adventurer. They are like the crazy super strong adventurers, and they don't really come into this story very much, at least not in the first season. The second season is supposedly on its way, but I don't know exactly when that will be coming out. So you meet the priestess. She goes in. She's getting signed up at the guild. Some people there's 3 other adventurers. They see her and they're like, "Hey, why don't you come on an adventure with us? And we're gonna go kill some goblins." And they act like goblins are like kind of lame monsters that anybody can go out and whack a goblin. And that's kind of the attitude they have about them. And so there's a boy adventurer. There's a and they look young. They look like high school, early 19, 20-year-olds in this group. And then there's 2 other girls. The one's kind of like a martial arts gal, and then there's a group of 4 of them, and they go to this cave, and they go in, and they're going in to fight these goblins and eliminate this horde that's been terrorizing a small community. And they come to the cave, and there's a totem in front with a skull and like different various things on it. And they go into the cave. They get about halfway through, and they find another totem, and they're all kind of looking at it. And then they continue on in, and then that's when they're attacked by goblins. But the funny thing is they're attacked from behind by the goblins, which they can't figure out because they just came from there and they didn't pass anybody going in. Suddenly they find themselves sandwiched between two groups of goblins, and they're being attacked, and the battle goes very badly. Now goblins, the average goblin is the size of I don't know, maybe a 8-year-old kid. They're not very big. They're quite small, about half the size of a normal adult. And anyway, but there's quite a lot of them. And so they go in and they start attacking, and this group just very quickly, I mean, they have some limited kills and successes right off the bat, and then are almost instantly overwhelmed. And by what wouldn't be considered huge numbers, it's just they're unprepared. They were all like porcelain level adventurers. This was their first real big adventure. The priestess, she's overwhelmed, doesn't know how to handle what's happening. One of the girls gets taken down. She's immediately stabbed in the chest. And they are not squeamish at all about showing you what is going to happen. So, I mean, she gets stabbed in the chest by the goblins, and they're holding her down, and they start ripping her clothing off. Now, I never saw what you would be considered complete full nudity, but it's really close. I mean, really close. Now you never see, Lord forgive me for saying it, but like nipples or like vaginal areas. Like you never actually see that, but I mean, it's close. So her clothes are getting ripped and torn, and then the guy, he comes to try and protect her, and because his sword is so long in this cave, it ricochets off the wall and gets blocked, and he basically gets taken down by like 8 or 10 goblins, and they just stab him to death. I mean, just the brutal death that happens to this kid, this young man. And then the other girl, who's kind of the martial arts fighter, she starts fighting, and she's actually doing pretty good. She's wailing on quite a few goblins, taking them down, kicking the crap out of them. She does a spin kick right into a hobgoblin, which is a different kind of goblin. He's a lot bigger. Hail brightest day. Thanks for popping in. So we're just talking about the first episode of Goblin Slayer right now, and I'm kind of giving the basic general overview here. So he catches her foot like it's nothing, starts to twist her foot, and then basically proceeds to bounce her off of the cave walls. And then she gets knocked to the floor, and a bunch of the smaller goblins rush over, grab her, hold her down, and just proceed to rip all of her clothing off. She gets flipped over and is raped right there. And although they don't exactly show the rape, it's about as close as you can get. You know exactly what's happening to her, which is, I think, one of the reasons that this anime gets such a hard time, is because they're not squeamish about showing the horrors of war, the horrors of what happens when people have no morals, when a group of, and see, to me, this is an allegory for other human beings. I mean, we don't have goblins in the real world, but we do have horrible people who just don't care. And then they think nothing of doing terrible, horrible things. You know, they're sadistic. Whatever you want to call it. They just have no empathy towards others. And that's what I take that as an allegory of what the goblins are. They are just evil, unsympathetic, nasty things. And and so you get to see what. And this is, I know this is something a little bit off topic here, but this is one of the reasons why when people talk about women in the military, I always worry about women in the military. Not when I say that, I mean more in direct combat roles, because quite honestly, the horrors and the ignominies of war are so much worse, can be so much worse for a woman than for a man. I mean, man, yes, you can be tortured, but I mean, everything that can be done to a man can be done to a woman, and more. And the more is the worst part. Um, I mean, and they kind of deal with that in this without like really rubbing it in your faces. And this doesn't go on for a very long time, but it's there. And it throws it into your face of, hey, bad stuff happens. And what I take from this is that these adventurers, when they're going in, they've just started, they're on the platinum level, and they think they can do anything. They think they can't be stopped. They think that they're immortal, that they're just so strong, because the one boy that's in this quest basically goes off and says, I once chased a couple of goblins out of my village, so they're wimpy. There's no big deal. Well, yeah, because and they go on to talk about this later in the series that they were probably the remnants of a destroyed goblin horde that were like the weak, or the ones that escaped and survived, and then he came across them, and so they were the weak ones that survived or ran away wounded. And so it gave him a false sense of being able to overcome these things. And it reminds me of young people today in a kind of a different way, is that it's been so long since we've been in a real war or real horrible kind of awful situations that we get a false sense of our own security, of our own abilities, of our own power and strength. And it really shows that in this first episode of what happens to people who overestimate their abilities, and who think they can't be beaten, and there's just nobody that can stop them. It's like usually they're the first ones to be taken down. Usually the big talkers are the ones that are the worst, and they get beaten, very quickly in a fight. So Adega says, not even in direct combat, these things happen to a few of our captured female soldiers. Yeah. It's just, and that's, like I said, a lot of people, I think, get upset at this anime because it deals with some really graphic topics, some graphic ideas and stuff. But it's like, and I don't get me wrong, I don't think it's good that you focus in on that kind of content all the time, but I think sometimes you need to have some of that to shock you out of your indifference, to show you just how bad things can really be. For example, right now there is more slavery on Earth than at any other time in history, but very few people know that, because it's all under the scenes, and sex trafficking and like sex slavery and sex trafficking and stuff is so horrific right now. I don't know how many of you guys or have ever heard of Operation Underground Railroad. I try and support those guys every chance I get, because they're actively fighting child sex trafficking. Sorry, the off topic from the anime, but that's the thing I liked about this anime, is it opens you up to thinking about those things in a different way. And me and my son were talking about this earlier today. If you look at this anime as just like sheer entertainment or sheer graphic, whatever, then I think you're going to miss the point of this anime. This anime opens you up to thinking about the way the world really is, and how the second you think horrible things can't happen, that's when they do. The veneer of civilization is always like this far from turning us into wild. Just to give you an example, if somebody detonated an EMP over the United States, or suddenly, all of the internet connections, all power stations, if that was all suddenly gone, the human race would eat itself in a matter of weeks. I mean, there would be mass death on a scale you couldn't even imagine. Because we've become so dependent on technology and other things for our life, and people don't really think about that. And because it's such a happy thought. I mean, yay! Brian, I thought you were going to talk about Goblin Slayer, not the end of the world. But that's what I like about shows like this. It makes you think outside the box. It makes you go, wow, we really kind of are just animals barely under control sometimes. And sometimes we're not even really under control. And it seems like the more I go about my daily life and I see what human beings do to each other, I'm just like, that's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. We are like that close from being Sodom and Gomorrah. If you're involved in the Bible at all. Anyway, so that's something that is interesting about this show. It really depends on how you look at the things, the subjects that they're talking about. You can either take it and be like, all right, I can do something positive with the subject matter that they're dealing with, or I can get all offended and clutch my pearls and be like, no. It's like, well, you know what? Rape is a real thing. Also in this first episode, there's infanticide. And for a good reason, because when they basically after this woman gets raped and dragged off, the priestess has completely disintegrated. She is like a ball of nerves sitting on the floor, watching all this happen, completely just in shock. She has no idea what's really happening. And I mean, it shows her wetting herself. That's how scared she is. It's the first time this girl has ever been experienced anything like this. And all of a sudden, from down the tunnel, you see flame kind of showing in her eyes, and walking towards her is Goblin Slayer. And this is when we first meet Goblin Slayer. He walks up, basically kills the goblins that are right there around her, and tries to make sure that she's okay, gets her talking. He's like, well, at least you can talk. That's something, at least you're not completely in shock. And then proceeds to basically go and clean out the rest of this cavern. And he uses her help. Her basic power is to be able, she can heal people, and she can cast like a protection light spell, which kind of blocks enemies from getting to her or getting through a barrier, and also blinds them. But so he has her help him, and he goes and finishes cleaning out this nest, which is controlled by a shaman, which there's different grades of goblins. And each one of the hierarchy becomes more problematic, and is harder to kill. And if a horde has one of these leaders, it makes it more difficult to deal with the horde. But it is just the art style, the quick action sequences, the fighting and stuff, while graphic and brutal, is really well done. Very, very well animated. And the lighting, I mean, because they're dealing with a very dark, I mean, you're in a cave. And so, I mean, anybody who knows anything about, like picture and design and stuff, lighting sets the tone for everything. When you buy a TV, you're looking for the black levels of a TV, because the black levels of a TV is what gives you the contrast, which it's what creates a better picture. The better the dark level, the black level in your TV, the better picture you're going to have. But yeah, this is, oh, sorry. I think it's just, oh, no. Which is the one to watch first? As far as the movie or the series, it's the series, I believe. I think the movie follows after. Like I said, I haven't seen the movie yet, so I might be wrong on that, but I don't think so. I think the movie comes at the end of the first season. So like I said, I'm going to go watch that tonight by myself, because I don't dare let my kids watch. I don't dare let my kids watch. I haven't let my kids watch any of this. Except for my son, who he watched it before, but he's 21 years old. So, but yeah, this is like, if you like action, adventure, just dramatic content. If you are really into that kind of an anime, you're going to like this. Because it is nitty and gritty, and I mean, he's a very quiet character. Like, he's not one of these verbose and nobody in this comes across as being over the top. Some of the characters a little bit more vocal than the others, but I mean, I like that about him, that like, he's not a man of many words. He doesn't say a lot, but when he does say something, like, it carries weight. It means something. And it's kind of nice, because a lot of animes have a lot of goofy characters, and there really isn't any of that in this. They're all pretty straightforward, serious characters. I mean, and what you find out, what's driving Goblin Slayer, is that his entire village was slaughtered when he was a little boy, and nobody came to help them, and he survived. He survived watching the goblins do their worst to his sister. He was in a hiding hole and saw everything that happened to his sister. His only family, his parents were gone. He was being raised by his sister, and he loved his sister with all of his heart. And he has to watch them brutally rape, murder. And that is one thing about the goblins. The goblins don't just kill you. That is why he hates them so bad. He doesn't do anything else. He doesn't take any other quests. He doesn't involve himself with anything else. He is just a goblin slayer. He has dedicated his entire life to their eradication. So he is very, very single-minded. And he ends up basically kind of partying up or teaming up with the priestess that he saves. And then later he ends up becoming involved with other companions. That's where we have the high elf archer come in, the dwarf shaman, and the lizard priest. The dwarf calls the lizard priest Scaly. Hey, Scaly. And like I said, they have like nicknames for each other. It's like nobody, like, seriously, those are the character names: high elf archer, cowgirl, guild girl. Nobody actually says their names in this anime, which is kind of funny. But I mean, they kind of do, but they don't at the same time. The guild girl, I really like her. Obviously, she's the one that puts the quests out and deals with them directly. Yes, yeah, I've never seen it. I have to apologize here. I've never seen Vampire Hunter D. I can't. I've been having a hard time finding it anywhere. And Gogo13, bless his heart, has been trying to help me find it, and I keep forgetting to go to the website that he's given me. I think I'm just going to try and buy it off of Amazon, because it's like one of the only ways I'm ever going to get to see it. It's very difficult to track down. None of the major streaming services have it. So yeah, I'm going to take your word for that's what I've heard. But his character is just, it is really good. And if you watch the intro to the stream today, the Spartan 072 who made that intro for me, that's some of Goblin Slayers in that intro. Because they talk about in the beginning that the gods rolled the dice to battle for who would be in control of the world, and that they rolled the dice and rolled them and battled it out till they basically got bored with this, trying to figure out who was going to rule the world. They each created their own kingdoms, and that's how you got lizard men, which is one of the main races. That's what the lizard priest is. He's a lizard man. Then you've got the humans, and then all the other different races and monsters that basically come into the show. So you're going to see that symbolism used a lot in this series, the rolling of the dice. And when you'll be able to tell that Goblin Slayer is becoming really intense when one of his eyes turns red in the helmet, because he wears his helmet almost constantly. Almost never takes his helmet off. Nobody hardly ever sees his face. And basically the one way you can tell that he's feeling an extreme emotion is one of his eyes turns red and like starts to stream. I mean, when he's moving around, it streams like smoke. And it's kind of an interesting way of showing an emotional response without being able to see his face or anything, which I think is just clever. Okay, thanks, Brightest Day. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm always looking for places to find anime that you can't find anywhere else. But I mean, it really delves into a lot of deeper emotional topics, but it doesn't like belabor them like, oh, I love it. It's dealing with the human condition of loss and unrequited love, and I mean these things that are part of our lives that we don't always talk about. We don't all, I mean, that we all kind of carry around with us, but they're not on display. They're the things that are inside of us that make us who we are, and that more often than not, nobody's ever going to see those things. They're never going to see what is driving you behind the scenes and stuff like that, or why you have the quirks that you do. And that's what I really like about this anime, is it really kind of delves into that without getting too heavy or too psychological. It just kind of comes out through the story. And I like that because it feels natural. It feels organic. I mean, you really start to identify with these people. And the trials and the struggles that they're having, even if it's something you yourself have never experienced, you get to feel what they're feeling. They really do a good job of portraying that and bringing that across. Like I said, if anybody who's an adult, I would suggest, go watch this. Just understand you're going to be dealing with some dark content. So if you can handle that, you will like this anime. But it's not overly comical. There are, some funny moments in it, but it really isn't. See, and I tend to lean a little bit more towards comedy type animes. I mean, I like them all, but I kind of lean that way. So to like this one as much as I did was kind of a surprise. And that they were able to tell so much of a story in 12 episodes really speaks to how they're not wasting any time. Like you never feel like an episode belabored anything too long. You get to feel the tension between the elves and the dwarves, which are kind of enemies, not really enemies, but they're not people that like each other. You are going to see a lot of Lord of the Rings parallels in this. In fact, in one of the sequences where you see Goblin Slayer being trained by his mentor, he actually uses one of the riddles from The Hobbit by asking him, "What have I got in my pocket?" He's teaching him how to fight and how to think on his feet by making him answer riddles while ice spikes hang from the ceiling with a flame underneath melting the spikes, and he can't move until he answers the riddles. But I mean, you will see a lot of parallels, and that's one of the things I liked about it, is that, I mean, they take some of those ideas from Lord of the Rings and they incorporate them into this, and it's like they paid homage to J.R.R. Tolkien. It didn't feel like they'd stolen. It felt like they were kind of honoring the lore that he set up and built, and stuff, because I mean, they don't really go into it in Lord of the Rings, but the goblins come off very much like they would have in Lord of the Rings. But J.R.R. Tolkien never got into what happened to the prisoners of the goblins in his books. They kind of do get into that with this. He's growing up and he's living on a farm with a girl that was his childhood friend. That's Cowgirl. That's the character name for her, and her uncle, that they were childhood friends. And so he lives there now and he pays them and stuff. And her uncle doesn't really like him. basically because he thinks he's broken, which he is. He's broken. He had to witness something that a little kid should never, ever, ever have to witness. It's actually, there's a book series by Ted Bell that I like, that this same scenario happened in that series of books. Trying to think of the main character for that series of books. And I just lost it. Hawk is his last name. Anyway, if you're interested in a really good series of spy novel books, go look up Ted Bell, and it's the Hawk series. But it's really good. But that's what happens to him. He loses his parents and has to pirates attack his parents' yacht, modern day pirates, and basically kill his father and rape and murder his mother while he hides in a cubbyhole. And that sets him on this path of where he goes. So it's an interesting thing to kind of show what happens from childhood traumas, and the kind of people they can, or the kind of things that it can bring out of human beings. But the interaction between the other three adventurers in the party, between the priestess, she's just sweet and kind and innocent and plays that kind of a character. The lizard man, he's probably one of the funniest ones in the group. If I had to give one critique for this anime, is that the person that they got to play the voice of the dwarf was miscast. I did not care for the person who voiced him. I kept seeing the dwarf, and then he'd start talking, and then I'd be like, no. It was wrong. And that was really one of my only critiques for this, is that they really desperately need to recast the English voice actor for the dwarf shaman, or the dwarf mage in this, because it doesn't come off right to me. It doesn't come off as authentic as it should. Everybody else's cast, the vocal cast is great. Other than that, I especially like I said, I like the guy that does the voice of the lizard man. He's really funny because he's lizard man. They basically are meat eaters. So they don't really farm animals. They just basically kill animals and roast them or dry them or whatever. At one point, he gets introduced to cheese for the first time. And then through the rest of the whole show, every time he gets an opportunity, he's just like, well, maybe we could get some of that cheese. And whenever he does it, I just think of that old TV commercial of, where it's like, behold the power of cheese. I don't know if you guys remember those commercials or not. But his character is quite entertaining. And as my son pointed out, which I hadn't really thought of it, he's almost kind of, his culture's based almost like on an American Indian type culture. Even from the way he looks and the way he talks about things and discusses things, he really does. And that's one of the things that is separate from J.R.R. Tolkien. But the gal that plays the high elf archer, I really liked her character. I thought the vocal actor did a good job. She's kind of arrogant and snooty and stuff like that, and kind of has this love-hate relationship with Goblin Slayer. And it's just, but there is some really great stuff, really great story that weaves this anime together and makes it worth seeing. I would definitely recommend this, like I said, to anyone who was adult enough to handle the material. They're going to be so some of the episodes, they deal with basically it's him going into different situations to kill goblins. But you'd be amazed at how much they're able to do with that, and how much they introduce, that it opens up the kingdom of the goblins, and to how do they get to where they are? Why are they what they are? And who leads them? And I mean, it really gets deep into that, and it really is interesting. And kind of in the background of this, there is a whole storyline of a demon king who has gathered an army, is marching on the capital, and Goblin Slayer is just like, I don't care. They're not goblins. All I do is kill goblins. I'm a Goblin Slayer. So that's kind of going on in the background of all of this. But he's leaving it to other people because, and that's the interesting thing, is it's basically like we're looking at the side story of a major story, if that makes sense. While everybody else is off fighting this big war against the Demon King and his demon army, Goblin Slayer is like the town sheriff who's trying to make sure that the towns and the villages are protected from the other threats that are more internal and stuff. And it really kind of goes to show, just because you're not on the front lines, you know, in some great military campaign, it doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't vitally important. Sometimes the big picture stories take precedence, but it's kind of the other people that hold the communities together behind the scenes that we never really hear about. And that's kind of what this story is. So it's kind of a refreshing way of looking at it, because you can see all this. I mean, you kind of hear about all the major story in the background, but he's focused on one thing that nobody else seems to care about, but it is a horrible scourge upon the people that needs to be dealt with. And he's going to be the guy that does it, because he doesn't want what happened to him and his family to happen to anybody else. And I mean, it's basically, I mean, if you wanted to put it this way, it's basically the difference between being in the military and being in a police force. Sometimes we tend to forget that the local police are the ones that keep us safe every day, while the military does the same thing, but it's two sides of a different story. And so it's a very unique perspective, because it's basically like saying, don't forget that while, yeah, there's monsters out there, sometimes the worst monsters are the ones right next to us, are the ones that we live amongst. And that's one of the allegories and the stories that I took away from this, is that you don't always have to be the guy out there, you know, winning the great wars. Sometimes you have to be the one maintaining the home front. And that job is just as important. And that's kind of talked about in this over the course of the story. And I really picked up on that the second time through watching this. And it was just kind of a refreshing way of looking at that story, something I hadn't really thought about in a while. You know, and which is odd considering what's happening in the United States right now with the police, you know, and the defund the police and all that nonsense going on that is just ludicrously stupid. And stuff that we forget just how important law and order and being protected really is. That if we lose the war at home, the wars out there the troops might not have anything to come back to. So I mean, it's an interesting story, and I really enjoyed that perspective of it. So I don't want to go on too much longer, because if I do, I'm going to start telling you way too much about the whole storyline of this, and I want you guys to be able to experience that on your own. Told you quite a bit about the first episode, mainly to let you guys know what you're in for, because there is, I mean, nothing quite as graphic as you see in the first one, but there is some more of that, because that's the Goblins' MO. They take women and treat them as playthings. They kill the men and they take the women back to use as breeding vessels and playthings until they kill them, and stuff. And one of the things that they deal with in the first episode, and this is where I'll kind of end on this, and this is a dark topic, so I apologize. You know, happy thoughts, everybody. In this first episode, as they wipe out the goblin horde and they kill all the goblins in this cavern, they go clear back into the back and they find a secret chamber, basically. And they go in and there's like 5 little goblin children, babies. And the priestess is like, well, you're not going to kill them, are you? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to kill them. She's like, well, you can't. They're just little, maybe they'll grow up to be good goblins. And he's like, no, there are no good goblins. These are creatures with long memories, and they hold grudges, and they never forget. And he basically kills the goblin children. That's the infanticide I was talking about earlier. Really dark stuff. But if I had to draw a parallel, I would draw it to a biblical term or biblical story. For those of you who don't remember, that when the Israelites were coming back into the promised land and being led into the promised land, they were ordered by God to kill every man, woman, child, and beast. Like all the livestock, all the animals, all of that, when they entered this region and took it back. Which I mean, when you think about it, it's like, that is really hard. And the reason why they did that is because human beings are similar in a way to how they describe these goblins. Sometimes letting your enemies live isn't an act of mercy. All you've done is created the next generation of enemies that is going to grow up right amongst you. And God knew this, and God knew that's, that if they let people survive, they would be instant enemies, and that they would just go on to cause huge problems for the Israelites in this region. So, I mean, it's a very hard thing to understand sometimes, but sometimes you have to clear the field. And that's one of the things that's kind of talked about in this. And it's not like, yay, everybody just kill children. That's not what I'm saying here. But you have to understand your enemy. You have to understand how your enemy thinks and how enemies work. And like I said, sometimes the merciful thing is to just end the threat once and for all. Because if you don't, you've created the enemies that will kill thousands later on. So it's some difficult concepts that they discuss in this. It's not easy. If you're looking for it, just sit down and whimsical. This is not the anime for you. This is going to make you think. It's going to make you question some of how you feel and think about the world, which I always appreciate, because it's just like, yeah, sometimes you've got to think about those deeper things, not because they're pleasant, but because that's the way life is. So don't let me put you off of this anime. You will like this anime, I think, if you like anime at all. But you're going to have to deal with some darker aspects of humanity and stuff if you watch this, which can be a good or bad thing, depending on what you do with it. Anyway, that's all I have for you this week. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everybody who came. Adega Outlaw, Brightest Day, Jester of Sin, Spartan 072. Pardon me. I think that was everybody that was in the chat today. So thank you for being here. Go take a look at this. Like I said, it's on HBO Plus or HBO Max or whatever there's one's called this week. But next week we will be discussing Ready Player One on Speaking with the Speaker. I'm really looking forward to talking about that one. I freaking absolutely love that movie. So that's going to be a little bit more lighthearted, a subject and stuff. And like I said, I hope I didn't put anybody off of watching this anime, because it really is good. It's just got some dark stuff in it. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I think some of my kids are going to join me for that Ready Player One review next week. Next week, I am going to, or actually either today or tomorrow, I will be doing another live stream, and I'm going, it's probably going to be tomorrow sometime. I don't know when. It's going to be a pop-up surprise stream about the latest Suicide Squad movie. I was a pretty big fan of the original Suicide Squad movie, so I wanted to talk about the second one. And if I can't figure out a time for doing a live stream, I will at least do a video on it and get it put out, because it's something I need to talk about. And anybody who got a chance, go watch that and come and join me for that. And because I want to hear everybody else's thoughts on that. Oh, hail Tommy, thanks for popping in. we're leaving now, but thanks for popping in. And Lady Miss, thanks for popping in. Well, you were awful quiet this week till right there at the end. Thanks for popping in. Thanks everybody. I appreciate you guys being here. And as always, have a great rest of your day and a good weekend. And we will talk to you again next week. Bye now.
Speaker for the dead. Speaker for the dead. Speaker for the dead.
My brothers and sisters, thank you for joining me. We gather here at this time to set forth, to right the wrongs, to overcome, to beat back and to destroy the ideologies that would seek to destroy our entertainment forever, that would take story and verse and turn it into something to divide, to conquer, and to destroy us. We must not let this happen. We will go forth. We will be a legion. We will take back that which is ours. We will fight, and we will be victorious. Now let us go forth and do what must be done.
Your time has come. A storm is coming. Our storm. And when it arrives, it will shake the universe. Long live the fighters!